I don't think there's one thing going on here to explain it, but it is clear that gun control is not the winning issue that Democrats thought it was going to be. I'm hard pressed to think of a campaign right now that is really out front with a gun control message, even when you think they would be, like the Arizona Senate race, for example. Mark Kelly, is not talking about gun control. He's running against a guy who builds ghost guns in his garage, and he's not bringing up guns. He
found a gun control group.
Exactly, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, there are some, mainly like Beto, I think Val Dennings in Florida, but those are generally not considered to be terribly competitive races.
Right. That's the other thing. I mean, you can't really point to a candidate who's been successful at making gun control an issue this cycle. On the other hand,
do you think that holds the other direction as well? Can you think of candidates who've made gun rights the central issue of their campaign and are having success with that?
So that's what's interesting, because I know that you had written about the NRA spending, and just like gun control groups have been cutting ads where half the ad or more is about abortion. Mm-hmm. The NRA has cut some ads that are about crime. I think you have seen,
which, by the way, I think that's another sort of, you talk about how polling's not everything, right? And I agree with that. And we have this New York Times poll. We have 2 polls from YouGov that are commissioned for different publications, but they basically show the same thing, which is that people listing guns as their most important issue has dropped by about half since June. So similar trend. The numbers are slightly different, but we have that polling. But then we also have some non-polling indicators like the gun groups themselves. They're still spending, right? They're certainly still out there raising money and spending millions of dollars in a lot of these big battleground races. But there's a tempering of the message, which if it's Evertown and Giffords, you're seeing abortion as the leading issue in the ad. That's the first thing they talk about. They might talk about guns after that as sort of trying to do connect the two things as being the candidate being extreme on social issues, and then the NRA has done, to their credit, I guess they focused more on guns than just my subjective judgment of watching the ads. The NRA is more focused on guns, but they do mix in a crime element in the same way of trying to connect the two. And in fact, they did a whole ad in Pennsylvania that is just about crime and doesn't mention guns at all. So that's sort of another indicator that maybe the gun groups are seeing this as not the top issue of the campaign.
It is. And two, I think, some of these states are not, I mean, look, Pennsylvania is not Wyoming when it comes to views on the Second Amendment, right? So crime is a sort of proxy for your ability to protect yourself. Kind of makes sense. We're seeing this in New York too, right? Lee Zeldin, there've been some polls that show Hochul up by like 11 points, but there've been some polls that show Hochul up by like 2 or 3 points too. So I don't know where that race is. Let's say it's somewhere in the middle. That's pretty competitive. And I'm kind of, on the one hand, I'm kind of surprised that Lee Zeldin has not made more of an issue out of the Concealed Carry Improvement Act. I hate calling it that, but that's the title, in New York. He did issue a statement, about the special session. He made a good comments after the Bruen decision was handed down, but he's not out there, demanding that people have the right to carry. This is not part of his stump speech, and it's not part of his standard attack on Kathy Hochul, or at least it's not one that's really resonating in campaign ads or things like that. And I'm kind of surprised by that. But I mean, you look at New York, and, the Democrats have such a huge voter advantage that any Republican who's going to win statewide is going to have to peel off most independent voters in order to do that. And that means you're probably going to have to moderate your message, right? And so you talk about crime and you talk about individual safety, and you don't talk up gun control, but you don't necessarily say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that you can carry a gun in Times Square. Like maybe you don't cut that campaign ad in New York. But
politically it makes sense. But that's the thing. Like, can you think of somebody off the top of your head who's laser focused on this issue on either side? And I think the answer is no. Even Beto, to a large degree, he's not necessarily focused on the issue. He does talk about it more than probably a lot of other campaigns, and obviously Uvalde happened in Texas, so it's more of an issue. But I just can't think of a good example of somebody who's run in the general.
Right.
You had plenty more talk about guns in the primaries, but the general election, I don't know that this has been the big focus. I mean, it's the economy, it's inflation, it's crime, right?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, absolutely. And if you're a Republican, given the advantages that you have over Democrats on issues like the economy and crime, yeah, why ruin a good thing, right? If that's what the voters want to talk about, then talk all day long about that. So in that sense, I guess you could. I don't want to say that guns are a non-issue, though, because I think that they do have an impact, certainly on our individual safety, and I think in many cases it is sort of a proxy when we talk about crime. And don't forget, I mean, it was back in August that Everytown for Gun Safety released that memo about how they wanted Democrats to frame this as Republicans are soft on crime because they don't support gun control, right? That was supposed to be
ads.
Yeah,
they've done ads with that message themselves, sure.
And that was supposed to be that the narrative going into the fall in November is like they're the ones who are soft on crime. They're the ones who don't care about public safety because they don't support a gun ban. What's kind of interesting to me is that it doesn't seem like a lot of Democrats. You're right. The gun control groups have run those ads, but I've seen a couple of Democratic politicians kind of, make that claim, but the Democrats just don't seem to want to talk about crime.